Hello everybody, welcome to this video. In this case, I've been itching to, that just doesn't even come out right, but not because of the itching part, but because I feel like it's something that I wanted to say. I've been itching to talk to you guys, or I've been itching to talk about all this stuff, but it just came out kind of weird, you know. Anyway, I'm a little bit rusty right now, I guess. What I do have good news, and that's as of right now, April 25th, 2025. I have just started writing again. So the problem there is that I downloaded a bunch of beats from this website for 300 pesos, like 30 beats or 40 plus beats. Um, and they were cheap because I only paid 300 for like a 1 month subscription. And those beats were made by AI in I think it's called Band. I don't remember, but it's a website. But anyway, I downloaded a bunch of beats from there, and but right now I'm seeing that I really don't like them. I mean, it's not that I don't like them; it's that I don't get inspired by them. And about 2 weeks ago, I did some freestyles, which are private right now on my YouTube channel, and those beats, the freestyles I did to those beats, which are like all around the beats, like beats from professional beat makers, um, like I got really inspired. So I just figure, what I have been doing is using beats that aren't mine without license and things like that. And that's wrong. So I don't want to be doing that anymore. I don't want to be putting them on Facebook and then Facebook telling me like, hey, you can't use these beats, or they're muted because you don't have the license or whatever. Um, so I figure I'll make the songs anyway because I do feel inspired when I listen to certain beats, and I still want to make songs. I don't want to stop making songs because I do like to make songs, record them real quick and whatever, get done with it. Um, but I don't know if I'm gonna keep them private on YouTube or release them. But anyway, that's the good news, that I feel like that I'm like more inspired to write. But anyway, I wanted to talk about a couple stuff. There's a lot on the table for today. This session might go on for like an hour. But anyway, let's get into it, because if not, I'm gonna run out of time. So the first idea is you are limited by your background, which is a past thing, and your context, which is a present or current thing, in the broad sense of the terms, or in the broad sense of those words. So first, let's start off with the idea, so we can, excuse me, we can kind of contrast this with the very generic, general, cliche, popular idea right now that is out there, which is like you're in charge of your life. You make your own decisions, whatever. And I'm an existentialist, influenced by John Paul Sartre, so I do believe in those things. But lately, I've been feeling more pessimistic, on the more pessimistic side, kind of disillusioned to a certain extent, because I'm not famous. I'm not, my music doesn't sell, whatever, all this stuff. I'm not a rapper. I'm not like a person that is a good communicator. I don't really have success in my professional work life, whatever. So I was just basically thinking, or coming to the conclusion that, you know, it's not my fault, really. I mean, you can say you're just not making a big enough effort. Like, you do one thing and you expect all these things. But I mean, people that do that, I believe, are really exceptional. Like, if you have a, I started from the bottom story, from like a rags to riches story. You have to be a very exceptional person to do something like that, because I mean, to really do something like that, because The Rock, and I've spoken on this before. He says that he had nowhere to live. He was living off his car. He had $7 in his pocket. But bro, he was a third generation nepo baby, a third generation wrestler. That's not nothing. I mean, you had connections. That's not a rags to riches story, if you ask me. That's just like, you're already in the context. You have the background. All you have to do is just try a little bit, and you're there. You don't even have to try that hard. But I mean, if you're really coming from nowhere and you really make a name for yourself, I'm talking no ads on your social media. Like, don't pay for marketing. Like, really, like, just based off your own merit, off what you're doing. Like, get famous without having money being pushed behind it, right? Without having money help you out, or connections, or the right people. You start working with the right, you have the right skill sets, and you're in the right in the right moment at the right time type of situation. Even luck. None of that. I mean, I'm really talking like zero. Like, you have no money, no connections, no skills, no idea what the hell you're doing, and somehow you still make it. I was watching the I think his name was the Harlan Sanders story, the Colonel Sanders from KFC story, and I watched two different videos. And the first one, I really enjoyed it because it just basically summarized his life, with the main highlights from his life, but in a very realistic way. Like, this was a guy that was dedicated to food, to people, to service. But his life was just like all over the place, right? Even when he became famous, he sold his rights, like the rights to his restaurant. It's not actually the Colonel who got famous because of his. It's not his effort that made him famous. It was the people that bought his company for $2 million, I think, at the time, and made him the face of the restaurant as a marketing technique too. And he was like, and then after that, he fought with the people from the KFC. He sued them. They sued him back. Like, and he ended up making his, like, a new restaurant, naming it after his wife. Um, the guy was just like all over the place. And the second video was just like, thanks to this guy, we have KFC and whatever. And it's like, no, that's how people neatly package biographies, right? Like, this is what he did in the past, this is what he believed in the present, and then this is what he did in the future, and this is how the company grew thanks to him. And it's like, no, there were obviously sharks behind him that made that happen, right? And he was just a marketing technique, a marketing strategy, right? Um, so yeah, basically you have limitations, and we can start off by the simple limitations that are basically the space. I mean, the geographical area where you're born, you know, and the time, the like the year and the era in which you live, right? You're determined by that. You're also determined highly, and I would think very importantly, by your social class and by your opportunities, right? Now, this is where a lot of, okay, so two ideas here. One, I was watching a video of this guy saying, you can do it if you really set your mind to it. Oh, people say I come from a third world country, it's hard. I came from a third world country, and look at me. And again, for me, it's like, you don't really know how that person made it. That person, even though you're in a third world country, there are wealthy ass people living in third world countries. If that person had the right connections, again, all he had to do was try a little bit, right? And it may seem like I'm speaking spitefully or resentfully, and it may be so because, and I admit it honestly, because for me, that's a disadvantage. Because if you really want something, if you want to do something, or at least try to do something, kind of like following the American dream, you really can't unless you are in the right situations, in the right conditions, right? I think about all these people, like in history, that have done something, that have been famous or infamous for something, from, I don't know, the popes to maybe Hitler, Al Capone, people like that, right? And I don't think those people really set out to be what they wanted to be, or maybe they did, but I think that they had to be in the right, for the most part, I would say 90-95% of all these people had to be in the right place at the right time. They had to have the right background and the right context. And again, all they had to do was just try a little bit. If Hitler wanted to be this like radical leader, of the Nazi party or whatever, bro, he was like completely in the right place at the right time with the right temperament, right? Like you, like it's like try to be a Hitler nowadays, right? Or try to be like a Pope coming from like a completely different background, right? Okay, so that was one idea. I forgot the second idea, but I remember that I told you two ideas. But anyway, I might remember it. But you are determined by, in the broad sense of the terms, right? You are determined by your background, that is, your family, where you come from, what your parents did, right? You can't really stray that far from your parents' personality and your family's background, right? Like you're kind of gonna be more or less like them. Um, Even if you do get to be famous, you're still going to carry that with you. And if you do get to be famous or wealthy or live a good capitalistic life, right? Um, you're going to be limited by, again, like it's a very limiting thought maybe, but I hope I'm getting the idea across. But one very limiting idea is like connections, like just people that you know, and the context. I mean, that's what it is: the context, the people you know, the connections. I think that pretty much sums it up. And obviously, like the vibe of the times, right? Like how things are. Like right now, everything's pretty dead. People are lazy. They just want to be scrolling through social media or sleeping. They're not really interested in doing things or getting out there or well, some of them are, but I'm talking in terms of like collaborations, helping each other out, helping other people out, right? Like we live in very individualistic societies. So that was an idea that I had in my mind, and I just wanted to express it. Because I feel like it's not fair. Just the fact that you, oh yeah, the second idea I think is like this idea of being limited or determined by your social class and the opportunities that you are able to access, right? Like let's say in Mexico you want to be like this artist, right? Bro, it's gonna be really hard. Like you're probably not gonna be able to get it unless you either save up money, you pay for marketing, and that makes sense. That's like actually really trying to go after your dream. But you're not going to get any help from anybody, is what I'm saying, right? There aren't like opportunities, real opportunities, that will actually get you. I mean, I don't even think there are opportunities nowadays. Like, what are you talking about? Opportunities? Like, opportunities for what? I guess the only way I see people having opportunities is when they're young and they're able to go to college, and like you have your catalog of careers you can choose to study. Here are your opportunities. But then as soon as you get out, it's not like you're going to be having all these job opportunities, because jobs or workplaces only hire you if they need people. They're not going to hire you based on, your CV or your experience or what university you come from or whatever. Right. So, and social class, I mean, maybe not in other countries, but like in Mexico, it's super important, because if you're not from a wealthy class, you're never going to be wealthy, basically. Right. Like you're basically only going to stay in your class. And it's really hard to, ascend or rise or climb up the social ladder, the economic social ladder. Right. And that's just not fair. Right. So what do I think of that? I think that well, in to a certain extent, I think that's the way things are. I mean, I think about people that are born, in wealthy families, like these kids that are the children of famous or wealthy people, and they don't have to worry about anything ever. They're just, and you may say, well, they also have their share of problems. Sure, I'm not saying they don't have their share of problems. They're human. They need to eat, they need to sleep, they have needs. I know they suffer. But it's not the same. I mean, there are things that are covered for them, such as the material needs. The economic needs are covered, and that's a huge advantage, right? And there are people that do stuff with it. Like I was just having a debate about nepo babies, and how most nepo babies suck ass. Like Will Smith's son, or in Mexico, like Eugenio Derbez's kids. Like they don't really do anything beyond what they must do to kind of like represent the family. But then there are other people like, Miley Cyrus. I think she was a nepo baby, right? And she acted, she sang, she's still working. um Mao and Ricky also, like they made music because I think they really do like to make music. That's their calling. It's not like, oh, my parents were this, so I have to do that too. Like Ice Cube's son, like my dad was a rapper actor, so now I have to be like a rapper actor who even has to do it even if they suck or whatever, and then just not like do it once or twice and then that's it, right? Like I think he's been in like 3 movies tops, and that's it. It's like, what are you doing, right? Or like Will Smith's kid that tried to act and make music, and it's like, what? Like, what are you doing? And then he like they just kind of fade into the background. So you have all these opportunities being wealthy, and then you don't take advantage of them. That's like, that's truly like damn, that's just sad. It's not disgusting, but it's I was gonna say disgusting, but it's just like yeah, man, if only I think about that. If only I were in their position, like I would be trying hella stuff. Or maybe they are trying hella stuff and maybe they tried that and they just don't like it. I don't know. But anyway, let's go into the next one. New time is longer than old time, but remember differently. This idea was kind of mind blowing. It has mind blown. It was mind blowing. It has to do with time. So the way that time is, they say time is actually relative. It's perceptual. So it depends on how you perceive it, right? It's not that time is objective and time always moves the same way. And I guess we're not talking about time in like the seconds, like 1, 2, 3 way, because that would be kind of objective, but in like the emotional sensation of time, right? Like, there are days where it's like, oh, like time is going by so slow, or time went by flying or really fast, like those type of expressions. So the idea here that I saw in like a video a while back, they use this idea of like you traveling to a new place. And in the way, like when you're on your way to the new place, everything is new, right? Like everything that you're passing by, the streets, the people, the buildings, or wherever you're going is new, right? And you're looking out the window and everything is new to you. And then when you're on your way back from the trip, hours later, days later, weeks later, or whatever, um, the things that you're seeing, you already saw them, right? So they're old, you can say. They're not as new the first time that you went there, right? So the idea here is that you perceive time, and let me try to get this let me get this right. When you're on your way to the new place, or to the place, and you're passing by all these new things, you perceive time as longer in that moment, right? So for you, time goes by, and by longer, I mean time goes by faster, right? So in that moment, you're perceiving that time flew by, right? And this makes sense with the idea time flies when you're having fun, right? So when you're constantly being stimulated by new interactions, by new dynamics, by new situations, by new buildings, whatever, like, watching a very engaging movie, being at a very lively party, whatever, having a very deep and thoughtful and engaging conversation with someone, you may be, or even doing these things that you really enjoy doing, right? Like what can you do for hours? What can you do so much that you forget to eat, right? Like what can you be, oh, I can be writing a book and it's like 6 hours have gone by and it felt like 30 minutes. Like, wow, like I need to get to bed, or it's already 3 in the morning and I'm still reading this very engaging book. It's like, wow, like I thought it was 11 p.m. and it's 3 in the morning, whatever, right? So when you have new things, you feel like time goes by very fast, right? That's the sensation, right? Now, when you're doing something that you have already done many times, you feel like time slows down. And that's why like kids get bored at school, because they're in the same classroom with the same teacher in the same building, every single day of the 5 days of the week, throughout years. So it's like for them, it's boring, right? It's like time goes by so slow. Or you're at work doing the same thing that you have always done day in, day out, day after day. And you're like, like time is going by so slow, right? So your perception of time in that situation, in those cases where everything is old, you can say, where there is no novelty, where there is no innovation, nothing fresh, nothing new, new stimulus coming in, no stimulants, no stimuli coming in. You perceive time as going by really slow, right? Now, here comes the twist, because one thing is to live it, but another thing is to remember it, right? And here's where the paradox comes in. So when you remember, like, uh, a time in your life, like let's say the way the first trip towards the destination, right, where you see everything as new, the lively party, the very deep, thoughtful, and engaging conversation, that engaging book, that engaging movie, that intriguing um, situation, whatever. When you remember, not when you're experiencing it, because we already said when you experience it as time flies by, it goes by very fast. When you remember it, you're supposed to remember it not as going by, time flying or really fast, but actually as everything going by really slow. And the reason for this is because you were constantly being stimulated by new things, right? So I think it's something called like a bookmark memory. Like there's a lot of things that your brain remembers. So that's why you perceive that as going by slow, right? Because you say, oh, like this happened and that happened, like that must have been like an eternity that I was there, and it probably was, right? It was that I was up till 3 in the morning. It was an all night party. It was 6 hours having a conversation. Like I heard that Carl Jung, Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, when they first met, they talked for like 12 hours or something like that. And they didn't even know that time had gone, that quantity of time, those many hours had gone by, because their conversation was just so engaging, right? But imagine the things they must have talked about, like so many new things, so much new input, right? And that's why it goes by that's why you remember it as it going by slow, because there's so much new information that you remember, that you process, right, that you recall, right? And the opposite happens with boring times, like old information or old situations in which you're in, like your job, going to school, waiting in line or whatever, like those boring situations where time is going by so slow perceptually, right? Excuse me. Because time is always going by the same way. It's always, second after second, minute after minute, hour after hour, but it's just your perception of time. It's more psychological. So the opposite is true when you're in a situation where, okay, so you're in an old situation, right? Like at your work or at school, and you're like, okay, so time is going by so slow. But then when you remember that, like if I were to tell you, how was work this week? What do you remember? How did it go by perceptually? You're probably going to remember it as fast, right? Paradoxically, remember it as fast, but experience it as slow. Remember it as fast because there was nothing, there was no new, what do they say? There was no new, um, yeah, like there was nothing new that it's like, well, I was at work, what did you do? Like I don't even remember. Like I just probably did the same thing I always do, which is this, spoke to the same people about the same things. you know Nothing really stands out. There was no new development, there were no new developments, right? So in those cases, it's funny and it's interesting how you're going to remember it as flying by, when you were there, you were experiencing it as time going by really slowly, right? So I thought that was interesting. And then the thing that you can do with this, it's like play with time. So the way that you play with time, they say, is like if you have to do something, let's say you have to get it done by 5 p.m. and it's 12. So you have 5 hours to get it done, and you procrastinate. You're like, oh, I have 5 hours, I can just chill, do other things, I'll get to it later, whatever. they say that you need to force your mind to do it, and by this, or you can do this by creating urgency. So instead of saying I have 5 hours to do it, say no, like just imagine the deadline is actually at 2:30, right? So you have half the time, or you only have 1 hour, right? So you have to get it done like now, and then as soon as you have that urgency, you're able to put your brain into action, right? Because urgency, and this doesn't really have anything to do with the old new time idea, but what's going to happen there is that you're going to, when your brain feels urgency, it's going to actually, get things done. So that's kind of like the tip there, right? Okay, now another thing is the idea of teachers, and this comes from a fellow teacher of mine that, we were talking about students and how he prefers, like, we're both college professors, university teachers, and he was speaking on how he likes to work, for instance, with like physical education students or graphic design students, right, and animation. And I remember working with physical education students, like students in university that are studying to be that career or to be that profession. And I remember that I didn't hate it, but I didn't really like working with them, right? I prefer to work more with other types of students, like for instance with law students. I really like law students, right? And I'm planning on teaching psychology students next. And I was trying to figure out whether my personality, my teacher profile and background, and the way that I am, basically whether or not it is a good fit for them, right? Or they're a good fit for me too, same thing. Um, and I asked the teacher yesterday, like, what do you think about psychology students? And he doesn't like law students that much, right? And I do. So for me, it was like, if he says that they're bad, that he doesn't like them, then I'll probably like them, right? And and I actually laughed when he said, "Oh, they're horrible," because I was like, "Oh, that's perfect." Because that means that I'll probably like them, because the students that you like, I don't really like, and the students that you don't like, I like, right? So um yeah, I was trying to figure out like how that made sense, because I was like, what are the similarities between psychology students and law students, right? Because I couldn't really like figure it out. Or what are the similarities between physical education students and graphic design and animation students, right? um, because I was like, they don't really have much in common. um, and I was trying to understand that, because I was like, well, what kind of teacher am I? And what kind of students do I prefer? Because I also teach students that are in their major to be teachers, and with them I get along, more or less. But now I understand why it's more or less. So what happens is basically this idea, and I think this comes in from Carl Jung's ideas on whether you're, the 16 personalities criteria, but not the 16 personalities, but the criteria, whether you're intuitive or more thinking. I think if you're sensing or feeling, whether, obviously the first one is introverted or extroverted, but I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about the other three. Or whether you're judgmental, I think, or perceiving, which is like adaptable. And then I asked ChatGPT about this, and it basically broke it down for me and said, okay, you are more of like a guide that directs individual students indirectly and ambiguously towards themselves, right? Inwardly. And I was like, yeah, that does make sense. Why? Because law students, just like psychology students, are more individualistic. They have to deal with more abstract ideas. They're kind of in that ambiguous terrain, right? And then, for instance, for my buddy, the other teacher, with him, it's more like he's not really a guide. He's more of a coach who needs to instruct, right, and give directly and clear instructions towards others, towards the social group, right? It's more of like a social dynamic. So those students are more oriented towards the group, right? And I think most people, and especially in Mexico, are oriented towards the collective, right? That's why we have that difference between collective and individual societies. And I guess I'm more inclined to, even though I don't dismiss the collective and I like sociology, my preference, my personal teaching style preference, we can just say at this point, is dealing with students that are more individualistic. And I even see this with my buddy because, for instance, if I say something, he'll want me to explain myself clearly, right? And my way is, I guess, more like ambiguous, more indirect. Like I'll just throw ideas out there and see kind of what they do, experiment with that, right? I'm not very clear about my objectives. I actually don't like being clear on them because I'm not even sure what it is I'm doing. I'm just doing things to do them. And people like him, for instance, I think do need to have like a real clear reason why they're doing what they're doing. So if you're dealing with like law students or psychology students, I think it's easier to understand them from that perspective. Not all of them, but I think most of them are going to be like that. They're probably going to be introspective. They're going to want you to guide them. They're going to want you to, and it's kind of contradicting because, it will say like you're more individual, mental, introspective, but at the same time, you're more feeling, right? It's intuition with feeling and judgment, right? Whereas with them, with people that are more, I would say, social and bodily, because my buddy would also talk about how he makes them like get up and do things and move around, right? And I think if you did that with law students or psychology students, they would probably look at you like, what the hell are we doing this for? And that's kind of how I felt also throughout classes. Like whenever people would say, or whenever I had teachers in college tell me like, okay guys, we're gonna get up, we're gonna walk outside, we're gonna, like walking through nature, things like that. Like I don't really see the point in that, right? It's pointless to me. It's like get up, stretch. It's pointless. Like what are you doing? Like, teach me, like make me think, right? I'm in school, I'm not in gym, or I'm not doing these other things. But I understand the group element because ultimately a class is a group dynamic and you need to also do group things, right? I just think we're nowadays more lenient towards that, and we kind of dismiss this other part because I think there are fewer individual, mental, introspective, intuition, feeling, and judging people than there are social, bodily, sensing, thinking, perceiving that adapt to new situations people, right? So I think that's like the difference, right? And I'll give you this other example where I have back in August, right now it's April, but August last year, I had like 15 students for this class, right? And as the class progressed, like most of them left, right? And I gotta say, in the beginning, I was very, excuse me, group oriented. Like I worked with them in terms of, let's do this as a group, let's do that as a group, and like I structure my class around activities and dynamics. But as time goes by, I can only do that so much, and then I just fell into routine, and especially because at first we weren't working with a book for like 6 weeks, so I had to come up with my own activities. But then after that, it was just like book, 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 right? And everybody ended up leaving except two. Well, I had four, but then two ended up leaving, and then now I have two, right? The other two, and it's weird because, oh yeah, the other thing I was gonna say is I know that lawyers, military people, and doctors have more or less the same personality. Doctors, I would say they're kind of weirder. I was actually thinking about like a doctor student or a medical student, like what is their personality. And even seeing scrubs, I know they say, I'm not sure, it's kind of like the difference between a fireman and a police officer. They say there's a difference between a surgeon and a practitioner, or a surgeon and a doctor in personality. I'm not sure if that's part of scrubs or that's something real. That may be something real. But doctors are a little bit weirder. What I do know about it, lawyers and military people, is that because I met some military people, like students, and they're ready to take orders, right? And I think it falls back to that, and that's where I would integrate psychology students in terms of, like being individually responsible, being responsible for their own thing, right? Whereas like maybe these other careers try to kind of integrate the group, or maybe it's not really my responsibility, it's our responsibility, right? Like more communist collective ideology. um, and the teachers, like I said, that probably happens with me because teachers, students that are studying to be teachers, they're more, I would say they're 50-50, right? Like they are trying to be individualistic, but they're also very group oriented. And I think it depends also on the type of thing or the type of level that they're studying for. The younger the kids they're trying to, work with, the more collective they're going to be. So like preschool, elementary, it's all group, right? And then maybe middle school, high school, and even university, it starts to get more individualistic, right? And that's understandable because when you're younger, you need, community. And then when you get older, you have more agency, you have more autonomy, you have free will, all these things that you can be responsible for your own person, right? Even though some people can still be very old and they'll still be, like codependent on the family or things like that. But anyway, that's a different topic. But yeah, I thought that was very interesting because it mixes these like weird things, like, it's like, yes, you're mental, theoretical, but at the same time, these other people that are more social and bodily are more logical, and they want clarity, right? So it like mixes things in a weird way, but it's also interesting. But anyway, I just thought I'd talk about that a little bit. And I'm trying to remember if there was anything else I wanted to say about that. I think just the profiles of students, I think they're interesting. Yeah, like, from students that are studying law, psychology, to students that are, and I did teach the graphic design students also, but I feel like, they were never disrespectful to me or anything, but I also feel like we just didn't fit, like my style, my way of teaching, of interacting with them. Maybe they just, and I didn't really fit with them, and it was just kind of like, kind of like with the physical education students. And it makes sense because it says that they're doers, right? They don't want to think, they want to do, right? So they need teachers that are going to do. They need teachers that are also doers, so then, they can connect and do things. And I'm more of a thinker. So for me, it's going to be like, give me students that are thinkers. That's maybe why these two students stayed with me, and they have persistently and stubbornly stayed with me. They even said they were going to close the group. I thought they would eventually leave, but I can maybe see where their personality comes in. Like, maybe they're more individualistic, lone wolves type of, ideology. And in that case, I can keep working with them, whatever, and I just go in there, do my thing, do the same thing I've always done, which is work with the book. um, and they don't complain, they don't leave, like whatever, they just put up with it. That's also another thing. I think they're very tolerant. They need to have a high tolerance. Psychology students, law students, soldiers, doctors, like all those people need to be very tolerant, like both physically, mentally, emotionally, or just wanting to be challenged in those terms, right? Whereas maybe these other types of students, and ChatGPT was like, it's not that they're shallow, it's just that they think differently, they're more creative, they see things more clearly or clearer. I understand that. Like engineers would also fall in this other category of social bodily with graphic designers and physical education students and things like that, where they want to have things, yeah, like in a clearer way, but they may have lower tolerance to things. They may even be less resistant to things, right? They may get frustrated with things quickly and be like, hey, like let me know what's going on, like I don't care about doing all this other thinky thing, like abstract thought stuff. But anyway, yeah. Okay, so another thing I wanted to talk about is, if the world is so modern, how come food is still conditioned? And this is kind of like, I'm coming in this video a little bit left wing oriented. But yeah, this for me, it's like, if we're so modern, if technology is so advanced, like for me, this is just, I'm gonna say this very quickly. For me, it would make sense if, like, with having so much technology, like I know that in some European countries, I think Canada tried, and European countries actually did it. They would give people free money and then they would just say like, you can do whatever you want. You can work somewhere else. You can get a job. You can focus on what you want to do. You can just rest home all day and sleep, like whatever. But here's the money that you need to like live, or something like that, or just some money. Why don't they do this with food? And I'm not saying like for us to have pizza and McDonald's every day. I'm saying like just our basic nutritious meal for everybody. Like we're just gonna provide your 3 meals a day. If you want to go out there and you could say, well, there are many problems with doing that. Yeah, I know. Well, I would say, well, there may have to be like many solutions for things like that. From I can just think of it right now, like they would throw away the food, right? I don't want this food, throw it away, and there would be a waste of food, right? But maybe have the option, right? Like have a bunch of centers where you, if you wanted to, you could go today for breakfast and lunch and dinner, right? And you had a nutritious meal, ways of verifying that you actually eat it, just not throwing away or selling it or stuff like that. But have that option of being able, because this is sad. Like food is still conditioned in terms of if you don't work, if you don't have money, you don't eat, basically, right? I mean, you can get, and I'm not saying that because like once a psychologist said, like, you don't starve, right, in a city. I mean, you can ask people for food, whatever. Yeah, sure. But I'm talking, you're not gonna be healthy, right? You're not gonna be nutritious. You're not gonna have nutritious food. Like I'm talking long term, years. I'm not talking like one day or 2 days. Like saying, oh, I don't have food for today. I can just get it, get free food from someone if I ask them and I explain to them I don't have anything to eat, whatever. No, I'm talking like every day, like years. Like we should have that option of having a nutritious, like 3 nutritious meals or whatever it is we're supposed to have, and not even good stuff, like just like really like the basics, right? So that's sad. And like that, there are so many other things that are like, what, like we're not really that advanced. Okay, 3 more things. The other one is the difference between recognition and recall. I found this to be very interesting. Jordan Peterson said this, and I was like, yeah, that's very interesting, because he said, well, you have the capacity, if you study for a long time, like let's say 10 hours straight, you'll have maybe the capacity for recognition, but not for recall. And to some extent, I associated this with like the notion of passive and active vocabulary. Like you have vocabulary, you've learned vocabulary that you don't use, and that's called passive vocabulary. And I've touched on this before, excuse me, but basically it's vocabulary that you can recognize, right? um, Excuse me, if someone says, um, I don't know, sue, maybe you never say sue, right? Like I'm gonna sue you, but you recognize it, right? It's in the back of your head. It's passive, or not in the back of your head, but it's there, right, in your unconscious or whatever. And then there's active vocabulary, which is the vocabulary you actually use. Now that doesn't really associate with recalling, but I understand it like this. I understand you can recognize something, right? Like I recognize it, which is like information, data, right? But it's not knowledge. It's not recalling. You don't know what to do with it. You don't know how to interpret it, right? Once you interpret it, once you're able to interpret that information or that data, then you recall it, right? It's like, okay, now I'm giving it meaning, I'm giving it context, I'm telling you why or how it's important, right? I'm not just telling you conceptually what it is, but I'm also telling you like the process of it, right? And I think that's recalling, right? I think recalling when you're learning or studying is more important, to be able to explain why things are, right? So not just recognizing like this is intercultural, an intercultural notion or whatever, but actually explaining what it is, right, with your own words, with your own examples, etc. So I think that's recalling, right? And I thought that was interesting. Okay, 2 more things. The Okay, so I wanted to do a little bit of a session with Chat with like ChatGPT questions. I asked ChatGPT to formulate some questions for me, and I wanted to answer them. First, I asked ChatGPT make me 5 questions. It did, but they were kind of complicated. So I said, make me another five simpler, and it did. So I have 10 questions. I want to kind of do them all. And I also wanted to talk about dynamic systems theory, which is like, I guess, one of the newer, freshest, or not, I don't know if it's really that fresh anymore, but it's kind of like when I was in college, it's kind of like as far as I got with that in spiral theory, in terms of psychological development and theories like that. So I want to make a video, but I actually want to study this, and I want to see what's beyond dynamic systems, which is like what's beyond duality, what's beyond all these notions that I've already touched on, like what's after this, what's beyond this, right? And if you were to, well, first of all, dynamic systems theory, let me just go with that before I go with the questions, I guess. um, Dynamic systems theory basically implies entropy and chaos, and it just basically says that everything's dynamic, everything's powerful, everything's moving. You got to take into consideration many aspects, kind of like I was speaking on with the teacher differences, right? Like, yes, they're intuitive and abstract and mental and individualistic, but they're also feeling and they're emotional. And these other people are more logical, but even though they're more logical, they're not as neurotic or goal oriented, or they're more group oriented, right? And it's like, how can you be logical but social at the same time? And how can you be into ideas and be more on the mental abstract side, but also be like more emotional, like what, like, and I think that's dynamic. I mean, it's like all of these things kind of mix together, and I think that may be a first step into going beyond dynamic systems theory, which is like, no, actually that's dynamic systems theory, that's not going beyond it. So in order to go beyond it, you would have to make sense of that, of those interconnections among interconnections, and then to go beyond that, I mean, I think dynamic systems theory, it's a mathematical idea, engineering idea, I think, or physics idea, but it like a lot of things from physics get extrapolated into psychology, philosophy, to be studied from this type of abstract, maybe individualistic perspective. Um, but I forgot where I was going with that. But anyway, I feel like to go beyond that, you would really have to understand that. And I don't think it's yet understood, or at least I haven't understood it yet, how all of those things, how the interconnectedness works, right? Because again, what's beyond that? What's after that? Kind of with my videos on what's beyond the dichotomy. Um, so if you were to ask me just right off the bat, like what's beyond dynamic systems? Um, it's just I can't help but think of the whole, unity. Like if you understand everything, you understand how everything works. But no, I think if you understand how everything works and how things are interconnected, maybe what you're able to do is actually start influencing the systems, right? And because that's why it's called dynamic systems, because it's in plural, it's many systems, it's many powers, right? And once you're able to influence the systems because you understand them, then you're able to shape, the course of different events, or maybe different situations, right? So you can become almost like a wizard, or maybe some type of reality manipulator, right? Now, if you say I'm going to be doing this in the mathematical engineering area of life, well, maybe you start manipulating machines, you start having cell phones, things like this. And if you say I'm going to do this on the humanities side, on the psychological side, well, you start, being able to manipulate and move systems of people, right? But I think you would have to know a lot to be able to get to that part, because just this fact that I'm dealing with the 16 personalities criteria, I still don't understand it. I mean, I would have to, because for me, it's easy to understand something when it's a dichotomy, right? Like, oh, you're either oriented towards the body or oriented towards the mind. You're either logical or emotional. You're either a man or a woman. But then here, like I've said, there's interconnectedness, and there's even paradoxes, right? Like there's even like apparent contradictions. Like how can these two things be in the same person, if they're contradicting each other, or stuff like that? But they are, because we are contradicting people, right? So once you understand those things and how the interconnectedness works, I think that's when you can really, but not just on an individual level or a teacher student interaction level, but actually like imagine dynamic systems theory in a social group dynamic or in social groups dynamics. That's when you can really influence people and groups, and then that's when you can really get things done and shape things. So I think that's probably where I would say it's going. Okay, and I think it's time now to get into the ChatGPT questions. Okay, this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna read all the questions and then I'll just go back and answer a couple of them. The first one says, "What truths do I believe only when I'm tired, and which ones come back when I'm fully rested?" Okay, very quickly, I think I believe mm, when I'm tired, well, I want to sleep. When I'm fully rested, I have all this energy. I think one of my beliefs when I'm fully rested is that I need to like start doing things of value, of worth, right? Like start contributing or contributing. Second question, which part of me always resists being summarized and why does it matter? I think I resist maybe being summarized in the emotional aspect, like if people get all like, oh, you're really nice or whatever. I think I resist that. I don't like being told nice things, because I feel like at the end of the day, that's kind of like judging me. It's the same thing as if you're talking bad about me. And I've said that before, I think. Three, what mental ritual do I secretly perform before I let someone truly influence me? That one's kind of interesting. Mm, I think before I let someone influence me, which actually happened yesterday when I was having this discussion with my buddy, um, I think I need to think about what I'm about to do. So it's kind of like a metacognition because I actually need to pull myself out of my stubbornness because I'm just arguing. And actually, the argument that we were having is on whether or not students, for that matter, or I was speaking more specifically on college students, but students for that matter should or should not be disciplined by teachers, right? If we should be like, hey, don't do that. Hey, pay attention. Hey, put your phones away. Because I'm on the side that, again, individual responsibility. And more if you're, more specifically or especially if you're in college, I can just be like, if you're not paying attention, that's your fault. You're an adult already. And my buddy was like, yeah, no, I mean, legally they're adults, but they're not really, they're not behaving like adults. You still have to tell them what to do and things like that. And I was kind of like, no, I understand that from like a high school, middle school, elementary school level, but not university because, you're getting them ready for the work life, for the workforce, so it's like, when are they going to learn that? But then, we say, well, it's different if it's a first semester student compared to an 8 semester student. And and then at some point I was like, hey, like start agreeing with him, or otherwise, or find common ground, or otherwise, let yourself be influenced by that person truly, and I started to kind of agree on some points. And, so what secret ritual do I perform? That like I have to think about what I'm about to do, I guess, and kind of say like, hey, stop being stubborn, and give way for flexibility, which works for me because I know I can be stubborn at times, but I do try to keep it flexible. So that's that's an example of that. Four, what does it mean for me to rest inside another person, and why is that so rare? Well, this is something from ChatGPT that I did, like this broad exercise on my personality. And rest inside a person, I guess, means to not have to worry about getting things done because that other person is going to get them done. I guess it's like the definition of trusting, not trusting, but knowing that the other person is reliable, committed, responsible. They have integrity, they're honest. I guess it's that you're able not rest on another person or inside another person. It's kind of like a weird expression, rest inside another person, not because you're able to like lay your head on them or fall asleep on them, but like, or in them, or whatever that means, but because you know that they got your back. You know that you don't have to be working for two. I guess that's kind of what ChatGPT told me based off what we talked about. Because sometimes, especially if you're kind of like me, you feel like you can tell someone to do something, but you kind of like have to watch that they get it done, to make sure they get it done the way you want them to, or the way it's supposed to be done, or whatever. So resting inside a person, I guess, means that, like, being able to really rest because this person's going to get it done, right? Which is rare, I think. Okay, 5. If my mind is a system that evolves itself, what does it fear being what does it fear becoming obsolete, and what must it sacrifice to stay alive? Oh, well, I think first of all it has to sacrifice um, knowing, I guess, relaxation, maybe to a certain extent. And what does it? I don't understand. What does it fear becoming obsolete? What does it fear? But I guess it fears becoming obsolete if I guess if our society went from a productive society to like a very hippie, laid back society, I think my system would become completely obsolete, because then it would have to find a way to be a system that relaxes. Like, what the hell, But that would be weird. But anyway, I think I have this system because when I was 19, I started to live alone, and I developed it to be able to, live alone, survive alone, pay my bills, do this stuff. So I had to become like very mechanized, or, mechanized, automated, almost like, yeah, like I guess you would say like a robot. But that's also my personality, because you could say there are people that have been living alone and are complete slobs or whatever, right? And I'm not saying I'm that organized or whatever, but I do get what I know has to be done, right? Like, I am responsible, at least, right? Okay, question number 6, which is this is part of the other 5. What's something I'm secretly good at that has no obvious utility in the world I live in? Well, I think I've been able to be good at maybe reading and interpreting things in a more or less correct way. Like, I can read something philosophical or whatever, and understand what it means, right? Now, is there utility to that? Well, yeah, like if you're a teacher, you're able to explain that to students, um, or there are other ways that you can apply those skills. But if you were to ask me, like, what's something that you do that literally has no utility, or hasn't, or I haven't found utility for it, something that I'm secretly good at, I don't know, maybe, I don't want to say overthinking, but I do think of different scenarios. Maybe being paranoid. I'm very good at being paranoid and overthinking different, like, extreme potential threat scenarios, potentially dangerous things, and they never happen. So there's basically no utility for that, and it just stresses me out. So yeah. The next one, what's a rule everyone seems to follow that I only pretend to believe in? There are a lot. Um, I think, like, the whole social parameter thing. Like, I think that whole area is like I'm super deficient in. I don't really know what the rules are there, how you're supposed to be doing things. The bureaucratic process also is very informal. Um, so I only pretend to believe in. Not even, well, I pretend to. I act like I'm in it, but I'm really not. I don't really care for it. Um, and I just, yeah, and everyone else seems to follow that. Next one, if my childhood had a scent, what would it be, and why does that memory still hold power? It's kind of interesting. I don't know. I want to say like and that wasn't even really my childhood. That was more, well, my childhood, I would say orange soda. Because we used to drink a lot of orange soda when I was a kid, or that was my favorite kind of soda. Orange soda. I remember we used to buy these packs, these 12 packs of, like, orange soda, lime soda, sometimes like grape soda flavored, and me and my brothers, just as kids, we used to just drink soda like that, like, in the middle of the day while we were playing and whatever. And then I guess as a teenager, the scent would be these like sheets that you throw into the dryer, to for your clothes to dry, and then it just smells kind of good, right? Like kind of homey, like it's like a feeling of home and comfort and fuzziness and yeah. So maybe that because actually that's when I started washing my own clothes, and I started to and I would use those like sheet dryers. I think they're called something like that, to dry the clothes so my clothes would smell good. 4 or 9 or whatever the next one. What belief of mine would collapse instantly if I lived in a different country or era? What belief of mine would collapse constantly? I would love to go to very individualistic societies. I think I know what they would be like. I wouldn't really want to go to collective societies because I feel like it would just be more of what I've seen. Okay, but you can think of it like this. Like let's say I go to a very collective, very highly collective society like India. Maybe a lot of ideas I have on why that's wrong would collapse and I would understand why it's right, and that's the best way to live, right? As having like family values, family bonds, all these things, right? But let's say I went to like Japan or Germany, or I don't know, like very highly individualistic societies. Maybe beliefs of mine that would collapse would be like the idea that individualistic societies are better than collective societies, because it's kind of stupid, but I guess I'm kind of like a contrarian in a way. So I would see that, and then I would be like, no, you guys need community and, family bonds, and this is sad, and, so yeah, like I said, we're influenced by our background and our context, right? I would like to live in a different country, not to get to know the culture or the country, which that would be kind of fun, I guess, if I had money, but for to see how it would affect me, because I think I would be influenced by it. Of course, you can't stay who you are, being in a different place. Like you're gonna change, especially if you're there for years. Okay, and the last one, coming to the end of the video, if someone had to impersonate me for a week, what would they struggle the most to imitate? Oh, that's interesting. If someone had to imitate me for a week, what would they struggle to imitate? Um, I think they would struggle to predict. No, I think they would struggle to imitate my unpredictability, because sometimes I have like sparks of you know inspiration, like right now, that I like yesterday night I knew I was going to try to rap to certain beats, but it wasn't until like this morning I thought I was going to do basically other things or nothing, just like research or whatever, or watch videos on YouTube. Excuse me. But then I got into it. I got inspired and I started to write rap songs, right? So that unpredictability. I mean, but you can almost say like, well, I kind of know what you would be unpredictable with. But then like I had gone through a phase where I was not writing rap. So just like it happens with rap, it can happen with this idea, it can happen with this other idea. All of a sudden I'm like, I'm gonna make a video talking about this, I'm gonna make an AI video talking about that, whatever, a story about this. Like that's very unpredictable, right? I guess like more than unpredictability, like the sparks, that I have. I think that would be hard to imitate for anybody else trying to be me for a whole week. Yeah, because I would at least in a week, I think I would at least have some of those moments, like every third day, maybe twice, maybe 3 times in a week. I would have that like, oh, like I want to do this, I want to search this, I want to look at this now, but yeah, so we've arrived at the end of this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you think about this, and I will see if I get working on that beyond dynamic systems theory. Got to study for that, got to read. I already downloaded like a little article of 12 pages to read it, and get thinking on that, and watch a couple videos on it, and yeah, hopefully come out with a video soon. And if I think of other things, I'll make another video. And yeah, expect music soon. I guess I will be uploading it to YouTube if there aren't any problems with it. But yeah, I'll see you guys next time. All right. So have a good day. Bye.